All right, welcome to your first lesson. We're going to be looking at opening up a terminal, getting an NMAP up and running, getting our Dockers up and running, and then attempting to look at some of the different ports within Metasploitable to be able to try to find any exploits or see which ports are vulnerable, try to find that low-hanging fruit as we call it, the things that are down low that are easy to get to and may be able to allow us to be able to get to root, pretty quickly, right? So let's go ahead, let's start this off. So the very first thing we're going to be doing is if you are on your student VM, then you already have everything that you need for this course. So we have our Terminator shell like right here. If you don't like Terminator shell, you could utilize whatever uh, terminal you would like to utilize. But for this course, I'll be utilizing this one right here. And what we need to do first is we need to get um, that Docker up and running, that Metasploitable Docker, right? So let's go ahead and we'll grab our command that we have within our PDF file there, within our notes and everything, and we can go ahead, we can throw that in here. Like I said, this is already on your machine if you're in a student VM. If not, you're going to have to do the other commands that are listed within the PDF file that you received, and you'll be able to download the Metasploitable machine. If you run the bash script that you were given, so if I cat that, I believe it's Subarranges bash, I forget exactly what the name of it is there. That quick cali, excuse me, if I cat that, right, you will have everything that you need inside of here, and it'll go ahead, it'll download for you. Hopefully it will all download just fine because there is a problem with Docker where sometimes it says they have to log in. So I do have it, hey, saying that, hey, we're not logging in, it's okay, right? So hopefully that runs just fine for you if you are not utilizing the student VM. We can see already that we do have an IP address for this Metasploitable machine, 172.18.0.2, and we'll be utilizing that IP address to attack it, but we'll also be looking at how do we actually find that IP address, what would we use to be able to find that, maybe something like fping, an NMAP sweep, net discover, how can we actually find IP addresses where we are, right? If we're on an internal network, how do we see other networks? How do we find that they're there? Things of that nature. Now for this is only going to be one IP address. It's just Metasploitable 2. So it should be pretty simple. But when you start getting into larger networks where it's an Active Directory network of 7, 8, 10,000 users, they're going to have quite a few networks there. And just because they say that, hey, we're using the 10 network, they may also be using the 192 network. Now we'll talk about that later on with statements of work and scope and your consent to scans and things like that. We'll talk about those things later on. But as of now, we'll look at how to install this Docker, and then from there, how to actually find that we're using this IP address right here. And then if you are not utilizing one of these machines, you may actually have pulled a different IP address. If you're not utilizing a student VM and you're utilizing your own machine, you may have pulled a different IP address, which then you would need to be able to find. So this is going to take a few minutes to actually install and actually get up and running. So we'll go ahead and we'll come back in a couple minutes, and I'll see you all then. All right, so after a few minutes, this gets up and running, and we can see that we're actually within the Docker itself. So if we were to do an ifconfig, we can actually see that we are in 172.18.0.2. So we're actually in the Metasploitable machine right now. Well, if we do a Control-Shift-O, then you will open up another terminal within Terminator. And if you're using tmux or something like that, I forget what the exact command is for that one, but you can also open up other terminals. But we can go ahead and we can start to try to see what is inside this machine and things like that, since we're back in Kali here. So since we already know that this machine exists, we could do an mmap tech sn, and we can go ahead and we can say 172.18.00/24. Now what this is going to do is this is going to ping everything within 172.18.0.0/24 network. All right, we're going to exclude 172.18.0.1 because that is us. If we don't know, then we can do an ifconfig on our own machine, and we can see that we are 172.18.0.1. Let's go ahead and hit enter here, and we do get back 172.18.0.2. So we know that machine does exist within this network. We could also do something like an fping, right, to be able to try to find it. We could also just try to ping the entire network. There's a lot of different ways we could try to find that there are machines up and running. We can also do a sudo net discover and just let that just run. We just let this just run, and it's going to try to find other machines within that network. As you can see, it found all my 192.168 machines in here, right? We got our two Nintendo Switches there, our Alexa. It's just finding different things like that, TVs, the 0.1, so my router, right? We're finding a bunch of stuff in here, but it should finally get to the 172 network, and it'll be able to find those. So we can leave that up and running. We could also run an ARP scan, for instance, if we use Metasploitable, or Metasploit, excuse me, or something like that, right? But we can get those different things up and running. So now we have that. Remember, Control-Shift-O to make a new, to split it horizontally. Control-Shift-E to split the terminal vertically. So let's go ahead and let's run an mmap on this. So we can run an mmap, tac-p-tac, very verbose, on that 172.16.0, or 172.18, excuse me, .0.2. Right? Now we'll go ahead and now run an mmap on it. But let's say we want more information, right? We can go ahead and do a tac-pn, which is going to say do not ping, because we already know that this is live. A lot of Windows machines don't like to be pinged, right? Windows just regular home machines, not servers. So we could run a tac-pn, like, hey, don't ping, but I know that, or I have a feeling, or I did an ARP scan or whatever else, there's something there, right? So we could do that. We can say, hey, I want to do a tac-sc, which is going to look at the default scripts that mmap has. So if we do a locate.nse, we can find all the scripts that mmap has, and then if you start reading about the documentation, it'll show you which ones are the default scripts that it'll run. Okay, and you can also change what those default scripts are, as long as you know how to utilize the mmap scripting engine, which is NSE. We could say tac-sv, like, hey, I want to look at all the versions, where these different versions that it's running, right? We could do a tac-a for an aggressive scan, which is already going to run the version and already do the default mmap scripting engine scripts that they have. We could run a tac-o to see what the operating system is. Right, but there's a lot of different things we could run. And to be able to see what we can run, we can do a man mmap for a manual. All right, now pretty much every single thing within Linux has a manual. Okay, this manual is very large. Okay, you can go ahead, you can run through it and read the whole thing if you want. You can also do an mmap tac-h for help. Some programs need a tac-tac help. So it'll look like this, mmap tac-tac help. It'll look like that. All right, but we see the same exact information here. But we can also run through that. We can print it off in different ways. There's a lot of different things that we can do. All right. So one of the things that you should always do, especially during a penetration test, is save all of your information. So we have already created a Metasploitable 2 folder. I'm going to go ahead and remove that real quick. So we're just going to say that like right there. We're going to make directory Metasploitable 2, right? And then we'll go ahead and we'll cd in there. ls-tac-la, nothing's in here at this time, right? So let's go ahead and let's start to look at how to save the information that we're receiving. So we'll do an mmap, tac-p-tac, tac-vv, boom, boom. We'll say, hey, I don't want to ping it. I already know it's up and running. There's no need to ping. We're going to do the default scripts. We're going to look at the versions of everything. And that tac-vv is going to show us the information as it comes through. Tac-p-tac is going to say, hey, do this on every single port, right? Every single port that you can find that's open, I want you to go ahead and run this on. Then we're going to do a t-tac-a. What this is going to do is this is going to save it, okay? Now, the nice thing with T is that we can see it as it is being saved. So if we were to do something like this, where we're just creating a file, and we're saying mmap.txt, we won't be able to see it. It'll all be put in there, but we won't be able to see it as it's being created. If we append a file, right, so we add it onto a file, we do the same exact thing, mmap.txt, and we can append that file, but again, we won't be able to see it. That t-tac-a, what that's going to do is that's going to actually append it, and we'll be able to see it at the same time. So if the file is not created, it'll go ahead and create it. If the file is already there, and there's already things in it, we will not overwrite it. We will just append to it. So we'll call this mmap.txt. We go ahead and run that. And let's go ahead and cd the Metasploitable 2 down here. And we can see if I cat that mmap.txt now, we can see that we're seeing the same information up here as we are down here. Same exact information, right? So that's how we know that, yes, that T command is running through and doing what it's supposed to do. This is going to kill the machine over here. So we're going to go ahead and stop this like real quick. We could always run it into Metasploitable or Metasploit, so MSF console, which we are actually going to be using this here in a minute. And we can run an ARP scan if you want, but we can see if we can get more machines with that. So now we have all this information, right? And it's running through and doing its thing. Let's also look at RustScan. Now, RustScan is made for speed. I have never, trying to think just to make sure that what I say is true. They may have ran it maybe on 1 or 2 clients networks where I knew that would be okay. But do not ever run this on a client's network unless you have dealt with that client many times and you know exactly what is on their network. Okay, if you become a penetration tester, you'll kind of start seeing the same clients over and over again because they may sign like a 3-year contract or something like that. So you know what their network looks like, right? You know the internal network there, or maybe it's a results review where after they have completed changes, different things that you suggested to them, you run a results review and you just want to get those ports that you looked at real quick. But RustScan, that is utilized for CTFs. Okay, so this is an extremely fast scanner. All right, now RustScan, the command has changed over the years as they have developed it. But what we can do is we can type in RustScan, U limit of 5,000, and then give it the IP address. Now we saw how NMAP ran, right? We saw how fast that was. Let's go ahead and run a RustScan like real quick, and it's done. Okay, there we go. You can obviously see printers, ICS devices, Internet of Things devices, all those different types of things. They can actually become brute forced or get brute forced, and they can drop due to RustScan. You don't want to drop ICS devices that are made to just do one thing at a certain time at that exact time, and it opens whatever, right? Or maybe it's a device that is used that it calls back to for APIs, right? To let's say see the most current housing market interest rates or something like that, right? You don't want to take that down just because you want it to run a little bit faster. Okay, they're paying you for a week, 2 weeks, a month, or whatever. They're paying you for that. Take your time, do it the right way. So we ran RustScan. We see that we get a lot of ports back. And with RustScan, something that's pretty cool is you can actually do a tac, and then you can call for NMAP commands, right? So we could do something like that. Okay, we could actually give it NMAP commands, and we go ahead and run it again. Now, obviously, it's going to take a little bit longer because now it's going to run NMAP commands on it. So it's going to do that tac-sc, tac-sv, but we do see those ports come back extremely quickly, and we can start to look through and see what the different ports are, right? So as we look through this, we can see that there's some of these different ports. We have FTP open, SSH, Telnet, SMTP, HTTP. Looks like we have SMB open, most likely Linux version, right? And then we start getting into some ports that we haven't heard of, right? Or that maybe we aren't as usual to see as what we think as what we usually see, right? We have port 2121, which we think like, hey, maybe that's an FTP server. We don't really know just because of 21. We do have MySQL open. We have VNC open. And it looks like we have some web ports down here. This is most likely something to do with Tomcat, like right here, the 8009. That's usually, what is that? That AJP13, I think it is. Ghost Cat, I think, exploited that one like right there. But as we start to go through, we start to see ports that we don't quite know what they are. And that's what this tac-sc, tac-sv is going to do for us up here. It's going to try to figure out that version of that port. It's going to try to see what is that port actually doing, right? Like we have a Ruby DRB RMI like right here. Never heard of it. Okay, we could look it up. Oh yeah, it is AJP13. All right, we can look it up. We can try to see different things about it. 6667 IRC, right? That's an old, the old gaming, right? So things like that. Okay, just like we said, 5900 VNC. So we can look through, we can get all these different ports and see what's actually going on here. PostgRE SQL. I didn't know that 5432 was PostgRE SQL. I've probably seen it a couple times, but it's not something that, has been stuck in my head. So now that we know what ports are right, things like that, let's make sure that we have all the machines that we can have, right? So we got our Metasploit open down here. Let's go ahead and look at an ARP scanner. All right, so we're going to search for ARP. And we can try to see, do we have any type of ARP scanning here? We do, an auxiliary scanner discovery ARP sweep, right? So let's go ahead and use one. We'll show our options. And we can see that we have our host. Okay, hey, who's the remote target, right? Who are you looking for? Who do you want to do an ARP sweep on? Well, we can say that 172 AT. So let's go ahead and do a set our host as 172.18.0.2, and we'll go ahead and we'll run this. And it kind of didn't really seem like it. It says you don't have permission to perform this capture on that device socket. Operation not permitted. What about .1? Can we run it on that? Nope, we don't have permission for it, okay? Most likely because we're going through that Docker, so we don't have permission on that one, like right there. That's okay. We can work on that later. We'll most likely be utilizing ARP scanner whenever we do our Active Directory portion. We actually get into a network. We make callbacks, things like that. But for this, probably because we're going through that Docker container, like right there, it's probably like, hey, what are you talking about, right? That's probably what it's wondering. I should have just left Metasploit open because we are actually going to be using that. So now we have all this. Let's go ahead and let's see what can we do, right? So I believe the documentation, it runs through port 6667, I believe. So we can go ahead and we can look at that port 6667 and see, do we actually find anything on there? We know that's Unreal IRC, so let's go ahead and let's search for it. So we can use something called Searchsploit, and we'll say Unreal IRC, right? And we do. We have quite a few things in there, right? And let's go ahead and cat that mmap.txt, and we'll actually grep for Unreal IRC. Now these two little arguments that we put in here, tech I just means, hey, I don't care if it's capital or lowercase. There's no case sensitivity here. I don't care. All right, case insensitive. Then tech A, that's used whenever you have a lot of data and maybe grep isn't able to read it. The data might be in different languages, maybe in different forms. It may think that's in like, some type of different C# language or something like that, when actually it's not. But the attack agent says, hey, just look at the data. Just look at the raw data and give it back to me, right? So we do see this Unreal IRCD, okay, on 667. I was trying to see if we could figure out what version it was, but we can just scroll up to that 6667, and we can just see like, hey, can we figure out what version this is or whatever else, right? Because it looks like we got 3.2.81, and we're actually not seeing the version here. Well, I always go with, if it's not varable, it's not going to work. That's how I always do it, right? So if they're using version 3.2.82, then I guess it's just not going to work. Or this exploit, right? But we can see that this one's written in Ruby, right? That's what that .rb says right there. So this exploit right here is written in Ruby. It says that exploit is written in Ruby, it most likely belongs to Metasploit. We can see right here that it does. That means that there is a Metasploit execution that we can run on that Unreal IRC. So let's go ahead and search for it. We'll search for IRC, or maybe Unreal. There we go. All right, awesome. So we found exploit Unix IRC Unreal IRCD 3281 3.2.81 backdoor command execution. Awesome, okay? We probably could have also just searched for this. All right, and we can. Okay, we could also have just searched for 3.2.81. 8.1, and it brings up the same thing actually, okay? Now we have this, we could use that, we could use 0, or we could use exploit Unix IRC Unreal boom boom, right? But we can just type in use 0, and it's going to go ahead and it's going to use that very first ID that we have like right there. So now we did that, we can do our show options. We want to see what are our options that we have to put in. All right, and it looks like the only thing we need is an R host. Let's go ahead and do a show payloads. We seem to be able to do a lot of different payloads here, right? We'll go ahead and exit out of that one. We have quite a few different payloads that we could run here. We could run a reverse shell, looks like a reverse Perl shell, a bind shell. The difference between those is a reverse shell, the machine will call back to you, okay? A bind shell, the machine will open up a port and wait for you to connect to it. Now, with firewalls and things like that, it's easier for a machine to call back to you, not for you just to have the machine open up a random port and then you go in and you connect to it. Firewall's probably going to stop that. So you'll be like, whoa, what are you doing? This port 11111 has never been used before and now it's just trying to connect to this machine. However, if that machine is calling for port 11111 out to the internet somewhere, it's like, oh yeah, sure, do go for it. Because ports, different things are on different ports, and that's how machines work. So let's go ahead and we can set the payload to something else. We would do a set payload, but we can set it to whatever we want to, right? So if one payload didn't work, we could try another one or whatever else. We're going to leave it as is. Let's go ahead and do our show options again. And we'll set our host as 172.18.0.2. That is our remote host. The remote port is 6667. It is on its default port. So what we can do here is we can type in run, or you can be really cool and type in exploit. Doesn't really matter which one you type in, okay? It says a payload has not been selected, so I guess we do have to set a payload. So let's go ahead and set payload, or let's do a show payload again. And let's see what we can do here. We'll try, we could try a reverse Perl, maybe. Let's try that one. We'll use that guy. Show options, because we're going to have to put in other information now. And we have our L host now, right? So we can set our L host as 172.18.0.1 because we know we are that person, right? We are that person. We have that within our I've configured like right there, right? We do own that network. So that'll make it a lot easier instead of trying to use like Ethernet 0 or something like that. Now, something else that we can do with this, just so you know, is we can also set our L host as, and I don't know if it's going to work with a Docker container or not, but I know you can set it as Ethernet 0, but you can set your L host as the actual name of the interface. So that works really well when you go through like tunnels or, things like that. Now let's go ahead and let's try run. Unknown command run. Huh? Okay, find an exploit. I never had run not work. So that was kind of a new one for me. This unknown command run. I don't know what that was, like right there. And it looks like it did not work, right? So I'm not really seeing anything on here. It said that it started the reverse TCP handler on there and everything like that. Let's go ahead and set our L host just straight to that 172.18.0.1. We'll try that run command again because for some reason that didn't work the first time. And that is weird that run's not working anymore. I've never had run not work. Never seen that before. All right, saying that all those fours are already 4444 is already being used. So we can set our L port as, let's say, 1111. Just going to try to run that again. Oh my God. Like I said, I never had not. You can tell that I never had not work because that's immediately what I go to is run. I've never really type in exploit. All right, and it doesn't look like it's going to work on this one either. So let's go ahead and let's try to change up the payload. So let's do a set payload. Do undo a show payloads. Might have to exit out of here and go back in. Oh, that's why, because I messed up. Okay, let's go ahead and search for IRCD again. We'll use 0. Notice that my payload is now that. See? So if I do a show options again, that's why run wasn't working. Everything else, I'm like, what is going on here? Let's go ahead and type in run. All right. Yep, the payload's not been selected. Set payload, and we do our command Unix reverse, and we'll try that Perl one again. Reverse Perl. All right. Now I still have the exploit correct. There's my payload. I don't know what I did, how I did that like right there. I'll have to look at the video and see what I did wrong. 172.18.0.1, right? We can also do our set L host. As you notice, you can type in 172 and just hit tab, or you could try that BR and hit tab, I believe. But let's go ahead and let's type in set our L port to, let's say, 2222, and we'll go ahead and we'll type in run now. And then there we go. I was wondering what is going on with this run command. I was like, I've never seen that not be able to do it. But okay, we get our command session open. That doesn't really look like we got a session open, right? We're not seeing anything. What if we type in ID? And we got to root. Okay, so we are now root. Okay, we can do whatever we want. We can cat that Etsy shadow and grab all the the hashes and try to crack those right. We can put in a script that calls back to us, right? Like a bash script or something like that calls back to us every minute or once a day at 12:01 or something like that. We can do whatever we want at this time because we are root, so we are God mode on this machine. All right, this is like being NT System Authority on Windows, root on Linux. So now we're here, cd to /root, and we can really do whatever we want. Let's go ahead and do a bin bash, see if that works. So we have a better shell. Doesn't look like it. Okay, that's okay. What we can do now is we can go ahead and Control Z to background the session. Yes, okay. and we have now background that session. We can get back into it with a sessions tag I. All right, we can see that we have it right there. Boom. Okay, so we can say session 1, and we're back in. Control Z to background it again, or we can just exit out of it, right? We can go back into sessions 1, and we can go ahead, we can exit, abort that session, Control C to abort the session. Now if we do a sessions tag I, we have no more active sessions. So that is utilizing Metasploit with Metasploitable, taking out port 6667, utilizing SearchPloit to actually find an exploit for it that calls for a Metasploit exploit, utilizing that, setting the payload to be able to make a callback to us, and then from there, finally getting that callback. With that, we also found the machine, right? We had to find it first. We also started up our Docker container, everything else. So this was a big lesson. Like right here, a lot of stuff happened in this lesson, and it may not seem like a lot of things happen, but we have utilized multiple tools to get to this point to actually be able to get into that port 6667 on Unreal IRC, right? We had to enumerate the machine. First, we had to enumerate the network, find the machine. Then we had to enumerate the machine. Then we had to find a port. Then we had to find an exploit for that port. Then we had to figure out how to use that exploit and find it within Metasploit. And lastly, we finally had to run that exploit, receive a callback, and notice that we are root, right? Many times you won't be root. A lot of times you're just going to be a user, and then you have to privilege escalate from there. So I'm really hoping this first lesson really kind of opened up your eyes to just how important enumeration is, because that is the most important step. It's also the most boring step, right? Usually that's how it goes. But just figuring out how important enumeration is, and then looking at different exploits to be able to do different things, and then finally trying to exploit that service. All right.